1987 is one of my favorite years in the history of heavy metal and hard rock. And I emphasize hard rock because this may be the single best year for hard rock music in the entire decade of the 80s. Over my shoulder, you'll see a big hint as to why, but the rest of it you'll have to find out next. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of The Metal Dude Abides. We have been doing a series on essentially reviewing the Grammy Awards and really looking at the fact that hard rock and heavy metal have always been neglected, ignored. So we started in 1967 and we've worked our way all the way to 1987. Now, why is 1987 an important year? This is the last year that the Grammys will not recognize hard rock and heavy metal. In 1988, they begin to finally put together a category for best hard rock and heavy metal. We'll get to that then. So this is really the last year where we are taking a look at a fictional view of what the Grammys should have done if they had recognized hard rock and heavy metal. And because this year in particular is such a good year for both hard rock and heavy metal, I decided to do this in two parts. Tonight, we're going to take a look at the best hard rock of 1987. Now, we're going to go through a lot of different categories, but the first category that we always look at is Best Newcomer. Let's do that one next. Many years we do these awards. Sometimes these are hotly contested between several bands. 1987 is a runaway train, if you will, a runaway night train, if you will. 1987 Newcomer of the Year, these guys, Guns N' Roses. Listen, you cannot understand the shockwaves that went through the rock and metal community when these guys debuted. Glam metal had become very safe. The hair metal movement had become very commercial. Guns N' Roses reminded us what makes rock and roll really good, raw and edgy. This sent a lightning bolt through the music industry. Now, I know that there are heavy metal purists who may not appreciate Guns N' Roses, and I get it. They're not a heavy metal band per se. But if you are a fan of hard rock, and in particularly the glam rock movement, I believe this band was the most important band in the entire time the hair movement was going on. Now, the Grammys that year selected Jody Watley, to which you can now safely say, who? Listen, I have been sitting up here again for 20 years talking about newcomer bands that came and went and how heavy metal bands should have been considered for this award. We are 20 years later, and not one single heavy metal hard rock band has ever won the Grammy Award for Best Newcomer. Now, it is possible you could make the argument to say, listen, a lot of times when hard rock and heavy metal bands come out, they're not a polished act yet, right? They build their audience over years. So, for instance, when Metallica came out in 1983, they were pretty much an underground band for quite some time. So you can't blame the Grammys for not picking up on these underground bands. And that's a fair critique. It's very easy to come back years later and say, why didn't you pick Metallica? It's a no-brainer now. But at the time, okay, let's give them a break. But if you use that argument, then you can't use that argument in 1987, because Guns N' Roses literally sold 18 million copies of their debut album. They were literally the biggest thing on the planet. And so for the Grammys to ignore this completely is quite a miss by these, and goes to prove that it's not about talent, it's not about impact, it's not about album sales. It's about a prejudice that they have against hard rock and heavy metal music. One other thing about Guns N' Roses that we're going to emphasize. The Guns N' Roses album, Appetite for Destruction, which we're going to talk a lot about on this episode, came out in 1987, the summer of 87. But it really doesn't hit big till much later. Almost a year later is when it finally hits number one on the charts, but really starts, picking up steam in the spring of 88. So once again, you may say, oh, the Grammys, when it first came out, no one really knew about it. Fair enough. But once again, it goes to show that the Grammys were not paying attention to the bands who should have been considered. They were kind of a reactionary type of board, if you will. Guns N' Roses should have easily won the 1987 Newcomer of the Year. And despite a very lackluster field, we're talking about bands that I was around at the time, never even heard of. Sister Swing, The Breakfast Club. I did get a kick out of one of the newcomers, was a band called Cutting Crew, who has the very infamous song, I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight, like it was played at every wedding reception for the next 20 years. I think Adam Sandler even had it in his movie, The Wedding Crasher. But I digress. They are the epitome of what is a one-hit wonder. So for Guns N' Roses not to win the award, not even to get a nomination, is a travesty, and just goes to show that the Grammys, once again, completely missed the boat. Now let's talk about Best Grammy, Best Hard Rock Instrumental Performance. While there is a great amount of talented young guitarists and drummers in the hard rock community, this award really boils down to two people. Our first, Joe Satriani. He puts out the instrumental album, Surfing with the Alien. Now, I've been around the block a few times, and there are instrumental albums that come and go, but I don't think I've ever seen an album draw so much rave review and focus as this particular album. Joe Satriani was hot, and a lot of people really were enjoying this music. He even had a little bit of a hit on MTV called the Satch Boogie. Joe Satriani, one of the greatest guitar players that's ever walked the earth. He also taught guitar to many of our great guitar players, including the infamous Kirk Hammett of Metallica. He was someone who received lessons from this legendary Bay Area axe slinger. But he's not going to win the award, believe it or not, in 1987, because that award is going to go to Dokken for their own instrumental song, Mr. Scary, written by another phenomenal guitarist, George Lynch, and a guy that doesn't really get a lot of credit, Jeff Pilson. Don Dokken had one of the best bands going, and a lot of times it was really easy to focus on the soaring vocals of Don Dokken and the shredding of George Lynch. But we should never overlook Jeff Pilson, a really strong bass player that made his mark in Dokken and also in other bands such as Dio later on. So the award for Best Hard Rock Instrumental of the Year goes to Dokken with Mr. Scary. Now let's go on to the Best Hard Rock Vocal Performance. The Best Hard Rock Vocal Performance of the Year is a bit of a runaway as well, which is very surprising because you've got some great singers doing some great performances this year. You have the formerly mentioned Don Dokken doing his usual fantastic work. Steven Tyler is back. Aerosmith's big comeback tour and album Permanent Vacation is an absolute masterpiece. You also have Joe Elliott doing a great job with Def Leppard. But none of those can compete with the winner of the award this year. Whitesnake, with their unbelievable hit Still of the Night. David Coverdale is one of my favorite lead singers of all time. He has been a contender in this field going back all the way to his Deep Purple days when he was on their album Burn. He has won this award on a number of occasions, including his rendition of the song Mistreated. You know, this year there's a lot of focus on Guns N' Roses, but I think we also need to appreciate the fact that Whitesnake put out potentially their best album, an absolutely masterpiece in itself that we'll be talking about a lot in the rest of this episode, fueled by the unbelievable voice of David Coverdale. Congratulations to Whitesnake, and congratulations to David Coverdale, winning that award way back in the mid-70s to now reclaiming his title as the best singer on the planet in the late 80s. Now we're going to get to the moment you've all been waiting for: Best Hard Rock Song and Best Hard Rock Album. As I was saying earlier, I think 1987 was the best year in the entire decade for hard rock music. So the competition for Best Hard Rock Song and Hard Rock Album are going to be intense. For Hard Rock Song, our first nominee, Rock Me by Great White. Great White did not have the long, storied career of some of these bands. They were pretty much a phenomenon, short-lived, that probably got caught up in the collapse of hair rock in the mid-90s. But make no mistake, they were a very popular band, very talented band. I always liked Great White because they were that kind of heavy metal, hard rock, blues rock. You know, there was always that, you know, the successor to Led Zeppelin, right? Zebra came along. Oh, that's the successor. Kingdom Come. Oh, that's going to be the successor. But I think Great White really was probably the best hard rock band that came around in that era, that kind of incorporated that bluesy Led Zeppelin-y type of sound. Their lead singer, Jack Russell, absolutely an incredible voice. This first album where they really broke big is right here. They kind of get a little bit commercial after this, based on the success, but this entire album is very good, and this song in particular is great. A quick funny story about Jack Russell. So I used to work for the oil company, the now defunct oil company, Texaco, in Denver, Colorado. And the corporate sponsors were sponsoring a Grand Prix race in Denver. So as an employee of the company, I got to be a volunteer for the big Grand Prix. And there was a celebrity race. And, you know, there was many, metal guys that were involved in that. Vince Neil, for instance, was also in the celebrity race. But Jack Russell was part of the race as well. My job was to go to the hotel and get Jack Russell, okay? Take him to the place where they were going to start the race and all of that. So I get to the hotel, and I kid you not, just as I walk up to the big glass doors in the front of the hotel, they're carrying Jack Russell out, handcuffed, and stuff him into a police cruiser and take off. And I'm sitting there going, now what do I do? The guy I'm supposed to pick up just got hauled off by the cops. So my job was kind of easy. I just, radioed it in and went back about my business. But kind of a little funny story, claim to fame, my only encounter with Jack Russell. So our nominee number one, Great White, with their great song, Rock Me. Now you knew this would have to be in there. Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses. This was the very first single off of the Appetite for Destruction album. What an all-timer. Like, I heard this song, and it was like, again, when Guns N' Roses hit, you'll hear me say this a lot, it was like a bolt of lightning. It just jarred you because it was so aggressive and raw and unpretentious. Not only was Welcome to the Jungle a great song, really loved the vocals for Axl Rose. Axl Rose is probably not everybody's vocal cup of tea, but he really does a phenomenal job on this song. Loved this, loved the accompanying video. This is the song that made me go gaga for Guns N' Roses. Our third song is from a band that didn't really make the big move, Leatherwolf, with their song The Calling. This is one of those bands that was really good, but I just think they kind of, to use a NFL draft parlance, they were kind of a tweener. They were almost metal, but they were kind of hard rock, and they weren't quite, the LA scene, but they weren't quite fit in anywhere else. But if you go back to their very first album and listen to this song, The Calling, you will be a fan of this very underrated band. Our fourth song, Love Removal Machine by The Cult. I love The Cult. They are right in the middle of a 3-album, I would say, just extravaganza, where they're putting out banger after banger. And this is absolutely my favorite song on the album, and one of my favorite guitar solos in the entire hard rock genre. I love this song. I'd never really heard of The Cult. This is where I come in. I saw the video, I think, for Love Removal Machine. I went, who are these guys? What's this all about? Went back, kind of got into some of their earlier works as well. And, of course, they're about to go big on their very next album, Sonic Temple. But right here, they're just, again, back to a very raw rock and roll sound that I really dig. If you, for whatever reason, missed The Cult, because, again, after Sonic Temple, they kind of go the way of the dodo. If you missed this band, you've missed something special. Go back to this song. Love Removal Machine is an absolutely excellent hard rock song. And finally, the other band we mentioned earlier, Whitesnake, with Still of the Night. The definitive Whitesnake song. Like, they have several good songs in their repertoire. But if you were to argue this is the absolute best song in the entire Whitesnake catalog, I can't argue with that. And for those of you who have listened to the channel before, you know what makes this song special? John freaking Sykes. One of my favorite guitarists of all time, takes band after band and takes them from good to great. And here, he takes Whitesnake from good to great. How am I going to pick amongst these classic songs? I have no idea. And the winner is... I have never invoked a tie before in my life. And I'm not going to now. Can't do it. There's no ties. You can't split the Grammy Award in 2 ways. But I'm telling you, Welcome to the Jungle and Still of the Night are not only the best hard rock songs of '87, because it really comes down to those two, but they are both would be in competition for best song of the decade. That's how good both of these songs are. That's how deserving both of these songs are. It's always kind of funny. It seems like there's years where maybe one band, kind of wins it because they're the best that year, but it's not the greatest song of all time. And then you have years like this where you have literally two of the best songs of the decade going head to head. But I gotta give it to the boys behind me. Welcome to the Jungle. This song is just so good. It ushered in the entire Guns N' Roses experience. And quite frankly, you couldn't go to a sporting event, in particular a football game, without, or a hockey game where, they get to the face-off or the kickoff and you hear that slashes, that early jam in that song, that unmistakable guitar riff that you know what's about to happen. You know where you are, baby. You're in the jungle. You're gonna die. You can't beat it. Still the Night is so good. But the winner is Guns N' Roses. Welcome to the Jungle. Now let's see who pulls down Hard Rock Album of the Year. '87 Best Hard Rock Album of the Year. Our first nominee, Def Leppard, with their album Hysteria. This was the big comeback from Def Leppard. They had not produced an album since 1983's hugely successful Pyromania. And while that may not sound like a long time now, back in the day, that was an eternity. Back in the day, for the most part, bands put out albums every year. Occasionally they'd put in a live album just to catch a break, But then it was back to work, and maybe there was a 2-year break, right? So for Def Leppard to take 4 years, there was a lot of anticipation for this album. Now, keep in mind, one of the reasons for those delays is their drummer had lost his arm in a terrible car accident. Rick Allen basically had to learn to play the drums with one arm. And at that point, I remember when it happened, I thought, how in the world is this going to work? But through computers and, using foot pedals and whatnot, they were able to pull it off. So that's, in and of itself, it's a great story. But Hysteria was also a huge hit. I think it released 6 big hit singles off this album. So many to go through. This was a long-awaited return and a triumphant return for Def Leppard. Our second nominee, Once Bitten by Great White. We talked about the song Rock Me, but they also had other great songs on here like Lady Red Light, etc. Again, this was kind of a rocky, bluesy kind of album that really showed off Jack Russell's vocals and really laid claim to that Led Zeppelin type of throne. Our third nominee, Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. Again, this album also produced several hit singles. Again, ironically, they had produced a few singles. The first one was Welcome to the Jungle. And it didn't go in, and it was crickets. MTV refused to play it. Radio refused to play it. Outside of California, no one was playing this song. So David Geffen, who had produced this, was one of his first big products. He went to MTV and says, just play it once a night. Play it on Headbangers Ball. You don't have to give it big circulation. Just a little bit. Give it a little bit of air. Sure enough, it became the most requested video on MTV, and then the radio stations kind of caught on. But even with that, this album didn't take off. They released a second video, Take Me Down to Paradise City. Great song. Great number. And again, really didn't take off. It wasn't again till the following summer, I believe, when they put out the third single, Sweet Child of Mine. 18 million albums later, this became I think at the time, it was the 11th biggest selling album of all time. Our third nominee. Our fourth nominee, we talked about it, The Cult, with their album Electric. This is probably my favorite Cult album. This is where I first heard them. And again, they're going to have their big hit in a couple of years with Sonic Temple. And if that's your favorite album, understand. This is that, there's always that album that's kind of raw right before the big one hits. That's Electric. Sensational sound on this. The production on this, the guitars sound so fantastic. Love, love, love The Cult. And finally, more competition. The self-titled Whitesnake album. One of the funny stories about this is David Coverdale and John Sykes produced this album. John Sykes came to my home state of Colorado and got very ill with Giardia, I believe, and he ends up in the hospital in a really sick condition. Well, as legend has it, the band members don't come and visit him in the hospital. So when he gets out of the hospital, he's pissed and promptly fires the entire band. So when you see the videos for like Still of the Night and the Tawny Katane trio, if you will, the trilogy of Tawny, the band that's playing in those videos is not the band that made the music to begin with. Again, that would have been John Sykes and his fellows. Now you've got Vivian Campbell. Now you've got Rudy Sarzo. Now you've got all sorts of Adrian Vandenberg. You've got all sorts of people in the band now. Basically, air guitaring and air drumming to John Sykes's unbelievably crisp jams. Our fifth nominee, Whitesnake. Again, I don't know how I'm going to select from all these, but here we go. And the winner is... It was a really tough call for Best Hard Rock Song of the Year, but it's a pretty easy one for Album of the Year. Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. This is, to me, one of my favorite albums of all time. It is, to me, the absolute best hair metal album of all time. If you don't like the terminology hair metal, I know some people find it insulting. Fine, I apologize. The best hard rock, California movement rock, whatever you want to call that era of hard rock and heavy metal. Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, it's the Cadillac. We talked about the best song on there is Appetite for Destruction. We mentioned one of the other songs on there, Paradise City. But there's so many other songs. I was a very rebellious youth. I loved the song, Out to Get Me. Basically, it's like, everybody's out to get me. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm freaking innocent. Love the lyrics of that song. Love the attitude of that song. But there are so many other songs. Rocket Queen, absolutely sensational. Funny story about this album. Again, it is one of those albums that it kind of, usually when an album comes out, it either hits or it doesn't hit. This thing, the first time I heard it, I was like, this is the greatest album of all time. This is fantastic stuff. I went gaga over it. But it didn't really take off into the mainstream for like a year. So, as it turns out, I'm getting out of college. I get my first job at this office with, I'm like this 21-year-old guy, and there's all the ladies in the office are all in their 60s. They were all crooning about Dean Martin. If that tells you what their musical tastes were like. And so I just put my headphones on. I'd be listening to Guns N' Roses and drawing the skulls out on my desk calendar and all the ridiculous things you do when you're in your 20s, right? So there was also a gal from the local high school. In the States, we used to have, I don't know if we still do, but they would have co-op programs. If you were like a senior in high school and you had enough credits, you could go work your senior year and get your credits that way. And so her name was Michelle, and there was this song. She was always saying, what are you listening to? I said, oh, this Guns N' Roses album, it's so good, you ought to listen to it. I said, they even have a song called My Michelle. And she was like, I don't know, that looks like the most ridiculous music ever. I don't know what you're listening to. It seems weird, right? So over the course of the year, this album takes off. So one day she comes into the office and she's like, everybody in my school is listening to this album that you've been listening to for the last 6 months. And then she says to me, she goes, what's the next big thing? I want to get in on this. I want to get in on it before the wave. And so I said to her, So I gave her 3 choices. 2 of them were very prophetic. One of them didn't really work out too well. The first one I said was, you got to listen to this band Megadeth. They are going to be huge. And she was like, I don't know about that. And I said, okay, well then Metallica. This is another band that's going to be huge. And she's like, I don't think either one of these bands is ever going to do much. And I said, well, if you're looking for something a little more melodic, maybe Y&T's more yours. And she's like, no, I don't think that's good either. So I said, well, all right. So not only did I show this person Guns N' Roses 6 months earlier, I fed her the Megadeth and Metallica, who are about to go nuts in about 2 years from now. But anyway, underappreciated in my time. I was doing the metal dude duties even way back then. Anyway, I digress. This is absolutely the best hair metal album of all time. Guns N' Roses, well, I didn't really like the commercial direction they went in after this album. Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 were okay, but nothing ever topped Appetite for Destruction. It's one of those things where you even when it was in real time, when it was happening right in front of me, I saw an interview with them on MTV, and they said, Appetite's good, but that music, we're already, that's music that we were writing 3 years ago. The music we're writing now is so much better than that. And I was like, oh, no, they're changing their sound. And they did become a lot more polished and, to me, lost that raw edge that made them the absolute best. 1987, Album of the Year, Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses. Now, next week, we're going to be doing this all over again, but we're going to be talking about the best heavy metal of 1987. So, in order to make sure you catch both sides of this, subscribe right now, and you'll be alerted next week when we do the heavy metal version of this. In the meantime, this is the Metal Dude signing off. Take care.